Well, welcome. Tonight, we're going to talk about a group of people that I hope you'll never, ever have to use their service. It's the people who are in the background of Milford, making sure that our lives are safe by putting their lives in jeopardy. We're talking about the Milford Fire Department and the firefighters that make it out. So let's start with an introduction.
Well, good evening, Al. Thank you for having us. I'm Mark Nelson. I'm the fire chief. I've been fire chief for 3 years. Born and raised in Milford. Live here now, and have a daughter in Stacy School, and a wife of 25 years. So,
Newlyweds.
yeah.
Hi Al, thanks for having me. Mike DeTore, Deputy Chief, Milford Fire Department. Been a deputy for about 3 years. Been on the department for 21 years. I have 3 kids. Live in Milford. Wife of 17, 18 years now coming up, I think. Yeah, yep. Goes by
Don't
quick.
get that wrong.
Yeah, goes by quick. Yeah. So, thanks for having us.
You'll be sleeping on the ladder if you
Yeah.
get that number wrong. I got to ask the question. The Milford Fire Department. Is that a good descriptor?
The fire department portion, it's a traditional term, but we're an all hazards department. I mean, from medical aid to hazardous materials to, unlocking your vehicle if you lock your keys in your car. We do pretty much do it all when you call us.
I mean, obviously, I never want to use you. I hate to seem cold, but I hope I never have to have any of the toys roll up to the house because it's on fire. But you sit there and say, how much time is actually spent fighting fires?
It's a good question. We probably do 75% of our calls as they're medical calls. We have a lot of vehicle accidents that we respond and assist people with, but those fires do occur, and we can never really predict when or where, so we stay ready 24 hours a day.
Oh, we've said, many times, police and fire are the groups that you hope you never use, but you want them there when you need them.
Well, I think they stay ready all the time, and we have a number of different calls, like the chief said, between motor vehicle lockouts to house lockouts to house fires to car fires, hazmat calls, fuel spills. We try to keep on expanding our services and help out however we can.
So somebody literally would call you to say, I've locked myself out of my car.
Correct.
Yes. Yes. So our calls for service for calendar year 22 were just shy of 6,000. So
6,000 calls?
just shy of, yes, 5,933 I think was the actual number. So those encompass public assistance, building fires, car accidents, medical calls.
That's 20 a day.
That's what we're averaging, yes.
How big is the department?
So our complement of personnel is 45, including me. But on a day-to-day basis, will range from seven firefighters and a supervisor or a lieutenant on duty, up to, when we're at full complement, it'll be 9 firefighters and a lieutenant on duty. Doesn't include the day staff, the admin staff, which is deputy and I, and our fire prevention officers.
It's hard to remember that you got to split everything by 3, because you can't give the memo there will be no fires between midnight and 5 a.m.
Right, so they're 24-hour shifts and split between 4 groups.
How does that work? Is that 24-hour shift? Seems like an awful long time to be on duty.
It's a long time, but you're busy, as you can see the call volume. It does go by. It is a great group of people that work there, so I think you kind of just get used to it and just get into that flow where you work your 24 hours, then you have 72 hours off, work 24 hours, and just kind of becomes part of life, like going to work Monday through Friday or anything like that. there's a lot of training in the downtime too. You're going on calls, you're training. It's a pretty busy 24 hours, so it goes by quick.
Now, is that something that the firefighters, if they could start from scratch, would they rather work 24, 72, or just straight 8-hour days?
I think the 24 hours would probably be preferred. You're there, you can get a lot done, and you're already in uniform, and your equipment's already on the truck. So there's some benefits to that for that schedule.
All right. So usually in the fire service, the shifts run either what are called 10s and 14s, so 10-hour days and 14-hour nights, or 24-hour shifts. So we transitioned probably in the late 90s to the 24-hour model, and I don't think you'd find any of the firefighters in Milford that would want to change back to a 10 and 14 complement.
I just worry that come hour 23, they're tired.
There are some long shifts, sure, but I think it just becomes part of the job, right? And they adapt, and it doesn't seem to be a hardship.
Proof is in the performance. So if they're performing, then it works.
Right. Right.
Now, we have 2 firehouses,
We do.
Birch Street, and I guess Spruce Street.
It's called Spruce Street.
Yeah.
Exit onto Main, but yes, it's.
I always thought it was Main Street, but
Right.
they told me it was called Spruce Street. Even divide, or how does it?
So, do you want to talk a little bit about that, or?
Sure. I think it's getting there. The calls on the Birch Street side, we kind of split the town in half, and for medicals or some calls that you only need 1 or 2 trucks on, one station would go. But the more major calls, both stations would go, and you get all the apparatus. I think with some apartment buildings and nursing homes and more commercial development on the Birch Street side, can be almost as busy as the Main Street.
Oh, I always thought Birch Street would be busier.
No.
No, I'd say commercial development down there maybe kept it a little more quiet if our calls were more residential, but it's definitely picked up over the years down there.
When that building was constructed in around 1991,
91, yep.
it was not as busy as it is now. So it competes more with Spruce Street in let's say division of labor, right? So there are always 3 firefighters at Birch Street. It can fluctuate. There can be 4, but there are never less than 3. That does not include the administrative staff. So it's kind of a misnomer that that's headquarters, but it's not the busier firehouse. The busier one is at Spruce Street, and that's where the lieutenant supervisor is stationed, and a complement of usually 4 to 5 people.
Now, when a call comes in, how many people go out?
Depends on the call, really. So a medical call at Spruce Street, 2 people, right? The second medical, if it happens at Spruce Street, right, the engine would leave with 3 people. That includes the supervisor. So that station can be empty, along with Birch Street. They can both be empty. They're staffed 24 hours, but there's not always somebody in the station, depending on, if calls are occurring and things like that.
Now, when we think of what we used to call Tui toys, the big toys, big ladder, pumper truck, can you walk me through the equipment? Like, what equipment do we have and what does it do?
Sure. What would you like to start with? The ladder truck?
1.1 million, I start with the ladder truck.
Well, I don't want to break the news to you, but engines are approaching $1 million now.
God.
Isn't that something, right?
Yeah.
So the ladder truck came to us in 2018 and replaced a 1996 model. Versatile truck. It is a big truck, but quite versatile. 109-foot aerial ladder. So obviously, for fires and reaching peaks of roofs and things like that, that's our go-to piece of equipment.
So that's like 9 stories high.
It's not. It won't reach
Oh, it's not
Nine,
vertical.
or right, we don't do it.
How tall is the tallest Milford building?
5 stories, maybe
5.
6 on one side for the hospital.
So it can get,
We have reach, yes, capabilities. Yeah, there's a moratorium on the height for buildings, I believe, are 5 stories.
Yeah.
So you'll see that in the new apartment buildings that are being constructed.
is that because of the equipment that we have?
I don't know the history of the moratorium,
Yeah.
right?
No, I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
because if you put up an 8-story building and you can only go halfway up,
No, understood. I don't think we can construct that size building in town, though. And usually when you get into those sizes, buildings are 100% sprinklered, newer buildings. They have all the latest fire protection features. But for our purposes, that ladder truck responds to fire incidents, car accidents. It carries an assortment of tools that can help us with vehicle extrication, fans for ventilation, and an assortment of ladders. And
so
things
it's
like
not
that.
just height that vehicle provides.
It's not.
Because you always think the ladder truck it's got a ladder.
Mhm.
You can get up high.
Right. It's got a pre-piped waterway to flow, 1,000 gallons a minute of water, maybe 1,500 gallons a minute of water. It's got a pump on it now. So when Chief Tui was here and we were getting that truck appropriated, we compared it to our older ladder truck. And one thing that we did not have was pumping capacity, or any pumping capability, I should say.
Yeah.
Didn't carry water. This truck does. Carries 500 gallons of water. It can pump 2,000 gallons of water per minute.
500 gallons you're going to eat up in 30 seconds.
We will, but I have to say that we had a very serious accident. And that truck goes on accidents, and we needed the water, right? So it's like I said, it's versatile. It's state of the art, and it's been.
So will you hook it up to a hydrant?
You can.
Can the hydrant pump out that much water?
It has the capacity to move and draft that type of water. It depends what kind of main we're on. It depends which hydrant. But that's not our pumping truck. I'm just saying it has the capability, so that when we're 4 calls deep, 5 calls deep, and the 4th or 5th call is a fire, 4th or 5th call is a fire, that truck can pump water. And it's happened.
It has happened, yeah. It's been a great tool with the addition of tools that truck carries.
Right.
One of the things I don't think people understand is Highland Street has a tank.
Yes.
Tank Field has a tank. There's tanks around Milford. Those are for you, aren't they?
The Highland Street tank that's the high pressure service, right? And Congress Street plays into that, but I'd have to, rely on my water department friends to do the total explanation. But yes, that is the high pressure section of the town, Highland Street.
But I mean, the main function, as I understood, was that if we had an extended fire, that would serve as the water reservoir for the fire department.
Yeah, I believe it has, it has a couple different roles, but
You know,
yes.
you always think of what's there to pump the water up and provide high pressure, but then I was told a big fire eats up a ton of water.
Right. Right, and other things like water main breaks and stuff can have an effect too on those tanks. So, yes.
So the ladder truck is kind of a vehicle of all trades. You've got a lot of equipment and
Exactly. Swiss Army knife on wheels. Yes.
Right.
big Swiss
Yes.
Army.
Yes.
Right. And the staffing on that vehicle fluctuates too. It can be anywhere from one person, unfortunately, one person taking it, driving it, to a crew of 3 or 4. Depends on what the call is. Depends how many people are in the station at that time when that particular.
Yeah, but
call
on
comes
TV
in.
you always have one guy in the back driving the back of the truck.
Yeah, we don't have one of those. A tractor-drawn aerial, right? So no, we don't have one of those. So one person can't operate this truck, but it is a big truck. We prefer to have more than one person on it. And we try to make that happen depending on what the staffing is for the day.
Obviously, there's got to be different training on different vehicles. Is it very, very different to be trained as a ladder operator versus a pumper or something?
There are some differences. I'd say the length of the truck, as far as the truck itself, some of the controls are different. The pump is similar. It's a side mount pump, which is on the side where our engines you can stand up and you're kind of in the middle. It's a mid mount pump, so you get some levers and you can go from both sides. So a little different, but it works the same way. As far as the operations, there are outriggers that come out to balance the ladder truck. So you kind of have to work that, especially if you're on a hill or uneven terrain. You got to keep all that into account. So yeah, there's definitely some differences, and knowing what the capabilities of the ladder are and what angles you can.
You're
throw.
driving a 100-foot truck around Milford?
Yeah,
I think they cut it down to about 40.
It's 42 feet.
Yeah, 42 feet.
Oh, okay, 40,
Yeah.
even 40
Yeah.
feet.
Yeah.
No, it's a long truck. It's a heavy truck. The operators also have to, they have to train, practice, placing that turntable. So where the aerial is operated from, up on top in the back. So that needs to be placed right because you have, as you know, tight streets and wires are everywhere.
I was going to say,
So-
telephone poles and...
Yes,
Mhm.
all of it. They're all obstacles. Sometimes we can't deploy that ladder. You'd have to use ground ladders. It all depends on the neighborhood, depends on the side of the street the fire's on. A lot of things come into play.
'Cause it seems like a scary movie. You got a metal ladder going up through electric lines.
Mhm.
I mean, one mistake, if he touches that electric line,
Right,
you could have a bad day.
right. Not always easy to see in the night, so
So we got one ladder truck,
Mhm.
we do.
and hopefully at $1 million+ it lasts a long time. Did we ever get rid of the old ladder truck, or is that...
We did. We did. There was a trade-in. It's no longer in service anywhere.
Because I remember the question came out, what do you do with the old one?
It's sad that you pretty much, well, at that time, got pennies on,
Well, you
on the
don't get
dollar.
anything for it, but
No,
Yeah.
it ends up going to some smaller town that
Mhm.
can't afford.
right. And then we have engines, right? So we run 2 engines at a time. That's our,
Are those the pumpers?
they are,
Mhm.
they are.
So their main role is
They pump the water at the fire, right?
from where?
So the hydrant, so they use a supply line of 100-foot lengths of 4-inch hose, right?
Wow, 4-inch.
4-inch hose. It's a
Yep.
small pipeline that we put
Yeah.
on the street. Hydrant feeds or supplies the engine. The engine pumps that water that comes into it out to the hand lines or the cross lays or the Mattadales or whatever you want to call them, the attack lines. Those are the lines we bring into the houses and or buildings.
So the hydrant doesn't have enough pressure to supply all the attack lines.
It depends how much the pressure drops when we open our first attack line. That's why the pump operator has to be really in tune, and they train on this, to know what the capacity is, because it depends, if I have so many pounds coming in and I drop, 10% when I open that first attack line, it tells me about how much more water I have left. So there's a lot of fireground hydraulics is
Do
what
we
the
ever
training is.
run close to running out of water?
Oh, we can outrun our water supply, sure.
Really?
Depends. It depends. If you have a sizable building that's on the same main, and we're grabbing, we ran into this a couple of times, where if you have a sizable fire and you have two engines that are grabbing from the same main or taking water from the same main, it can only supply so much. So sometimes we have to find a hydrant on another main or something like that. Dead end mains can be a problem for us too.
Dead end main?
Right, it's not looped, right? So
So it's not getting replenished.
right, or if you're on the last hydrant on the line, right, on the main, and then another engine comes in, you'll steal your water, right? So so we have to be aware of all that, right? That's just tactics and planning for, you know, how much water I'm gonna need to fight this particular fire.
Now, are the engines also used on medical calls?
They are.
Because I was amazed once when I said, wouldn't it be more efficient to have little medical vans? And if I remember right, the answer was, yeah, except if there's a fire and we need the crew.
That's the drawback, yes. So, yes. So, at the Birch Street Station, we only have an engine and a ladder in service down there. So that engine will go on the medicals down there. They are increasing, so we don't know what the future will bring there, but for right now, the engine's doing that. At the Spruce Street Station, we do have a rescue truck. That does the majority of the medicals. It's a pickup truck with a cap on the back that has some equipment in it. And that's the one that does the majority of the runs, and that's worked out well and doesn't put the wear and tear on the engines. Then the engine there, when the rescue's out, will do the next medical that comes in. So they're all,
But if you've
Oh,
got
wow.
4 people
Mhm.
and you peel off 2 to do a medical, and then there's a fire, I'm kind of slow, but it tells me you only have 2 people, 2 chickens left in the coop.
Well, we have the other firehouse.
You'd have to, you'd pull from Birch Street.
Oh, absolutely.
yes. Yep. That would be a call that no matter what, both stations would be going on. So in that case, if you had two firefighters on the rescue truck tied up on a medical call, you'd have 3 on the engine at Spruce Street, and then you'd have another 3 at the other station between those 2 trucks that would come.
I remember back, my daughter's high school days, when we wanted to take a picture of the class. And looked up at the high school and said, who wants to climb up on top of the roof? We didn't have a lot of takers. But yet one of the Milford firefighters somehow rallied the troops and brought ladder 1 to the parking lot. And I was amazed because it was a full complement of firefighters. And I felt guilty. I said, we need just 1 to put the ladder. He said, yeah, unless there's a fire. We're not going to drive back downtown and pick them up. So I guess it's better to roll them all at once.
Right. It's difficult because we don't want to put the wear and tear on the expensive apparatus. So one thing that we did recently, I'd say within the last 2 years, we had the opportunity to buy a spare truck from a community that was getting rid of it. They were trading it in, and it wasn't useful to them anymore. And I think it was about $1,000.
Yep.
But it was a perfect backup rescue truck.
Oh.
So when what we're trying to do operationally is make some changes or be more efficient. So when that first rescue truck is out of service for maintenance or repair or something where it can't be used, instead of using that engine, we used the $1,000 backup truck, right? And it's just, that's worked out well. But we don't have the capability to put that backup truck at Birch Street in place of an engine because I need to have the people on, the firefighters on the engine if they're out doing a call. I can't have them have to come back and switch vehicles.
Well, the other thing too is having something as a backup may not qualify as having
Right.
as a front line piece.
Right.
Because unfortunately, you don't get the option of saying, can we deal with it tomorrow? I need to fix this truck today.
Correct. No, absolutely, Al. That is, it's a perfect backup truck, but yes, it would be tough to deploy every day for those reasons.
Well, I remember years ago, we needed a brush truck. That dang thing was $350,000.
Right.
And the chief at the time, I can't remember if it was Rev 1 or Rev 2, came to us and said, I could buy an Army surplus truck and for 50 grand buy the tank and the pieces.
Right.
And we saved a fortune that year.
Well, it's funny you bring that up. So we were, in 2015, we did buy that new brush truck. We had to replace, the older model from the 80s. Right? So we have a fantastic brush truck, but we need to be able to bring water into the woods, there are obviously no hydrants. So that vehicle you're speaking of, that carries, it's an Army surplus vehicle that carries 1,500 gallons of water, which is very helpful. And another neighboring community was no longer using an Army surplus tank vehicle, and we are just about getting that into service at a cost of about $4,000 to the town. I'd say 4,000 or
Yeah.
5,000, right?
Right around there, yeah.
And its
Yeah.
sole purpose is going to be to bring water into the woods. Another vehicle for that, just to make us, better operationally for brush fires, which last year were a challenge.
Well, I mean, I live up by what old Milfordians will remember is called the U-turn. And not that my generation ever went up there and lit fires,
No.
but when we first moved there, kids were going back in the woods and lighting up fires. And you could smell them, and it was concerning, because you never know if that gets out of control.
Right.
And we were happy to see that the Milford firefighters never flinched. They somehow just plowed right into the woods and put the fires out.
Like I said, last summer they were a challenge. We had one particular day. I think it was a weekend, a Sunday or something like that,
Yeah.
right? So I was at one fire with apparatus near Clark's Island, and Mike took the big fire, the 16-acre fire.
It's a very windy day.
Right?
Now, Mike, are these legit fires, like lightning strikes, or are they goofy fires that kids set? And
I want to lean more towards the goofy ones, because usually it's not raining out when they start.
Oh.
Like that, yeah, so definitely points more in that direction. And they vary in size and location. So that's why the specialized equipment is definitely necessary. And the new brush truck, for example, is great, because our old one served us well for many years, but this new one has twice the pumping capacity, and we seem to always be further away from the truck, so it's definitely helping get the water there. But like the chief said, getting water out to the woods is the big challenge.
Right. And it's not uncommon for us to do 3,000 or 4,000 feet of hose into the woods. That's
half a
almost-
mile of hose?
Yes.
Mhm.
You could have one strong pump to push.
Which is what, right, so, and we have that, so. But yeah, when you look at the, how much hose we bring in and drag out after, and yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, I remember when we did the new vehicles, the big thing was to keep the hose and the fittings and the pieces, because how expensive they were.
Mhm.
If you put fire in front of something, it becomes very expensive.
So how many of these not legit fires, in the woods, do you deal with a year?
I'd say it varies year to year. I feel like last year we were about 35 to 40-ish range. I think about 10 years ago, I remember we had around 50. And then
I mean, that's in 90 days?
I'd say from April to October-ish, maybe, 6 months.
So 100 some, it's one every other day.
We had the drought this past summer, and fires started burning in the peat and the root beds and traveling, popping up in other places. So once the fire happened, we didn't necessarily have another fire. It may have traveled, so we ended up
Maybe a
having,
continuation.
sure.
But you're thinking most of these were set, not somebody wanting to be an arsonist, but make a campfire and.
I'd say for, a
Right.
bunch of reasons.
They weren't
Yeah.
occurring naturally.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but you read about out in California how you have some sick people who want to torch
Right.
large swaths of trees and all.
A totally different type of fire on the West Coast versus what we're dealing with in Milford, right? We have a lot of, it's rare that the fire gets into the treetops and burns like a wildfire. Generally, there aren't structures that are, in danger with these, but they are labor intensive, and
You still
we
gotta
do
put them
get-
out.
We do, and people do get hurt. We do fall down, and get injuries and things like that because it's such uneven terrain, and it's all leaf covered, and you can't see what you're stepping into.
Exactly. And when you get to rocks and then you're flowing water, the rocks get wet.
And they get,
And
And
slippery.
yeah.
right. So it's all, a lot of it's quarry land too, so.
So we've got rescue truck,
Mhm.
pumper or engine, ladder, brush truck.
Then we have an air supply truck, which has a cascade system of large air bottles
Is
pressurized.
that for the scuba bottles?
Correct. Yep. And that will enable us to refill our bottles on scene at a prolonged fire. So that's been helpful, because if you only have a certain amount of bottles and so many personnel there, you run out of air. It's kind of hard to operate out there. So it's a great piece to continue to operate.
Like, how do we do on PPE? In general, you read about the danger that firefighters face with their, what do you call them, turnout gear, or
Sure.
their clothes, their boots. Are we doing right by our people?
There's been a lot of changes over the years. I like to hope that we're doing the best we can with the information that we're given. We do have a gear washer at each station and a gear dryer. All new firefighters now get 2 sets of turnout gear, so if one gets soiled, you're able to wash it and still be in service with the other one. So we're trying to keep everybody as clean as possible. The PFAS is a newer thing that we're trying to deal with. I'll let the chief elaborate on that a little more, but as far as keeping clean, having new gear, and the options to keep your stuff clean, it's come a long way.
Well, I remember when you all came and wanted to buy that dryer, nobody blinked. It was a dang fortune, but it was a matter of, okay, what's the price of the safety of the people running into the fires?
Right.
And it was like, it's a given, do it. But when you start talking about the perfluoro, the PFAs, the PFOAs, it's only the last half decade that we're realizing that they're in the water supply.
Right.
I mean, you think about everything, the skillets we use, Teflon coated, and we heat them up. So you're going to extract, best way to extract it is heat it up in oil, and it goes right into the water supply. And I don't know of very many treatment plants that can get rid of such non-polar, defluorinated hydrocarbons.
Right, the forever chemicals.
The forever. Well, I mean, think about the old days when we said the best pesticide in the world is DDD, DDE, DDT. Why? Because they were forever. They got into the bug's nervous system, and then it just went up the food chain. But what's happening with clothing and things online? Because from what I'm hearing, the PFAS are an issue for firefighters.
It is. So cancer is prevalent in the fire service. We've had our own cases that I don't want to get into specifics about, but we've dealt with our own cases of cancer in within our department. We're taking a long look at how we can minimize the exposure of the firefighters to carcinogens. So obviously we have products of combustion, carcinogens in building fires, structure fires, car fires, dumpster fires, things like that, where their skin is absorbing carcinogens, right? So we do our best to decontaminate them on scene and decontaminate themselves on scene. What we're finding now in the research that's coming out, and based, you can read all kinds of articles in trade journals and opinions and research and science. We're finding that this PFAS is getting absorbed by the firefighter's skin because because of the studies that are coming out. So we're trying to find ways to balance, right? And it's always tough because all turnout gear contains PFAS. And,
Why?
but turnout gear is your best thermal protection.
Why do they have that?
Our understanding is it's
Is
part
it
of
the water repellent?
right, it's part of the moisture barrier. So you have an outer shell, for your turnout gear, you have a thermal barrier and a moisture barrier. And somewhere in that moisture barrier contains these chemicals, that are making firefighters sick. It is in your everyday life, but they're putting it on their skin
Well, it
every
makes
day.
sense because when you think of the fluorinated hydrocarbons, they are about as nonpolar as you can get. So they're going to repel water, just like Teflon. You know, you take a skillet, you put a little bit of water on it, you can see it just rolling around.
So what we're also hearing is that even showering after an incident does not remove, those chemicals from their skin. So now you're going to some incidents. Our mission is to be ready, right? So we're leaving the firehouse ready, and they're putting this gear on, and they don't always need their gear. So now they're exposing themselves even in times when they don't really have a thermal
So you're
incident.
elongating the exposure for readiness.
Right. So we're trying to, in working together with the firefighters union and us,
Mhm.
we're working as a team to try and come up with ways to minimize that exposure. And we're just about ready to release, a new policy that's going to hopefully take care of our older firefighters. We're all exposed. We've been exposed for 30 years, right? But our newer firefighters that haven't quite had the same exposure, we're trying to give them the benefit of that protection. So we're going to try and minimize in certain areas. The public's not going to see the difference in what we're doing
No, but
operationally,
realistically,
we're trying to.
if there
make it
was
better.
something we could do, I mean, it sounds like blasphemy that somebody from the FinCom is saying, if we had to spend money, we will. But we all respect and understand that you're running into danger. So if there was something like that oven or the dryer, you didn't get any grief about how much it cost.
No, we have
It's
tremendous support.
it is what it is. But this is scary that, how do you fight Teflon?
Right. But it's still your best protection, at an incident. I wouldn't not wear my gear because of that. But we're going to try and minimize, what we do. And we were fortunate to get grants. Mike worked hard on getting a grant for a gear dryer at Birch Street. So,
Yeah, so we were able to set that station up. And that was helpful. So now you don't have to travel to one station to wash your gear. You try to make it as convenient as possible. And it's almost now easy to do that. You can see soot and you can see ash and you wash it, where the PFAS is invisible. So that's the hard part.
I mean, that's the whole thing of in the water supply and everything. You're not going to see it at the parts per trillion level.
yes.
I mean, some of the PFOAs, the maximum allowed limits are like 2 parts per trillion.
I know, it's kind of funny because when we think of measuring, even carbon monoxide, when we meter a house, it's parts per million.
Right.
And now we're in the parts per trillion, and we're saying, wow, that's really small.
Yeah.
But now, as far as gear, you got your suits, your boots, your helmet. What other gear does a firefighter rely on?
It's called a hood, which covers your neck, your ears, kind of protects your head underneath your helmet. And that's a sort of thermal barrier as well. And that's evolved over time. There was a study that found that particulates from soot and what was being put off by fires was being absorbed in the skin. So now there's a barrier inside there to try to block that. So the gear definitely has come a long way in the last 20 years, even the last 10 years, I'd say, with things like that.
And,
Right.
right.
So go ahead.
No. And then our self-contained breathing apparatus. We can't do our jobs without it.
Oh, that seems like a given.
Right. So, but that's it's a very important part of our personal protective equipment.
Do we have the best gear?
It's good. I mean, I would say we have very good gear. it's constantly evolving like technology.
Well, I mean, you can
But,
never
yeah.
have the absolute, do I have the
Yes.
fastest hard drive?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, today I do, tomorrow one's a little faster. But in your opinion, Milford's provided
I-
top line?
I feel like we're always, we seem to always be at the front for like new technology, right? When the buddy breathing systems came out many years ago, we were one of the first to have them. So, yes, like I had mentioned to you before, we have tremendous support when we say that, or when we explain why we need something, we don't go without, and we appreciate that because it makes us able to do our jobs and do them efficiently.
That goes both ways. Like I said, I don't think we've ever really hardlined the fire department because the fire department's never gone overboard. I mean, $1 million truck, but it is what it is. You know, I don't want to have my house on fire and the truck break down halfway or run out of water.
Right.
You know.
No, it's a busy community, and we have to, I've said it before. We have to be ready with our, top of the line technology.
What are the biggest issues you run into as far as the community?
As far as issues,
Is it people parking their cars for the wrong places, not being cooperative?
I'd say that the community itself is
I think so too. I don't really think we have
is
anything.
not a hindrance at all,
Yeah.
at all for us. No,
That's good news.
right. No, I don't. I mean, people are usually agreeable and cooperative and want to help us do what we need to do to, to get the job done, right?
Well, like I say, I remember years ago, we had our little cul-de-sac. We have our annual barbecue party. One of the kids fell off the wall and bumped his head. Of course, 7 years old. Every parent freaks out. Before we could blink, engine 1 was there. And there was something, and I know this is corny, something reassuring about seeing Scotty Marshall, Teddy DiPaolo, the people who you knew
Right.
coming off that truck. I have nothing against the ambulance service or whatever,
Sure.
but these are our people. These are people who've been on the soccer field with us.
Yes.
You felt a lot more comfortable.
Well, they're going to reassure you, right? And they're professionals, and they're members of the community. And for us, it's all about providing great customer service, right? And great patient care. That's what we're trying to do. And we do team with our ambulance. Community EMS is our private ambulance provider. They provide the transport to the hospital, right? If you're sick or you're injured, it's a great team. And they're professional and they provide great patient care. And day in and day out, this is what we kind of do behind the scenes. You don't see it very much, probably, right? But it's, as we mentioned,
No,
with
but
the
at
amount
the
of calls.
At the end of the day, Mark, I don't see the white ambulance. I see the community members with the fire
Sure.
uniforms on. When I looked up, I saw Scotty. I saw Teddy. There's probably 100 people behind them that doesn't matter. These people I know. They're born and bred Milford. They've been on the soccer field with my kids. And I should be able to trust everybody, but these are our kids. And it's just, the tension level went way down. The fact that they were there in minutes really helped too.
Sure.
We keep thinking of Little Milford, but Little Milford's gotten...
Little Milford's pretty busy. The square miles haven't changed, right?
No.
But the number of streets and number of houses, and now, think of the new units that are being constructed as we speak behind Birch Street, behind the fire station there, firehouse there, and then on Deer Street, right?
Do any of the new complexes bring additional challenges to your group?
Yes and no. I think just by virtue of having roughly, I'll throw out a number, 500 more, units, right, apartments, we're gonna do that many more calls for assistance at those complexes.
Oh, the medical calls.
Medical calls, and you think, there's, 500 more dwelling units, right? So there's that many more kitchens and laundry and things like that, so. But those are 100% sprinklered buildings. But they're large, and that you have a
But
lot
now,
of
when you say
people.
they're 100% sprinklered, all new buildings have sprinklers?
Depends on the type of building. Those housing units have sprinklers.
And what do the sprinklers really do?
Well, if you take a look above your head, so they have either a thermal bulb or a fusible link, and when it heats to a certain temperature,
Pops and,
exactly, and the water flows out off of the deflector and usually extinguishes or at least controls the fire.
so it does have that much of an impact.
It really does. It really does.
Yeah, their main purpose is for life safety, just for the occupants to exit the building. It can also put the fire out, but
Right.
the main purpose of it is to get people out.
And it's not like you see sometimes on the TV shows where all the sprinkler heads are flowing at the same time. That's not, unless it's a specific type of system, that's not how they're designed. So usually one or two sprinkler heads.
Yeah, but on the
Take care.
TV shows, Mark, they conquer every fire within 45 minutes.
Don't I wish?
And there's no smoke either. You just see fire.
That's
There's
it.
no smoke. Perfect
Yeah, yeah.
visibility.
Starts at 9 o'clock, by
Yeah.
9:50, fire's out, everybody's happy.
I wish we could explain actually what, or you could put into words what a fire actually is like. Just heat, dark, and can't see your hand in front of your face.
Why did you want to be a firefighter? Of all the professions, except maybe military and police, which would be equal, but of all the professions you could have picked, why do you want to run into fires?
I think because the first question asked is, how do you describe the fire department? At the end of the day, whether we're running into a fire or unlocking a vehicle, you're helping someone. Whether it's to help them with a convenience, their life, their property, that's probably the most rewarding part of it, is being able to help someone.
Right.
So you kind of don't really think of it when you want everybody to be safe, and that's the first objective, but you're there to help, whatever's needed.
But doesn't it take a toll on your family?
I don't know.
I mean, like I say, I kiss my darling bride goodbye in the morning, and she worries I'll get a bad paper cut at the office and come home with a Band-Aid. All kidding aside, you guys are playing for real.
Right.
It's got to worry your family.
It does. It takes a toll on family. The call-outs at all hours, doesn't matter really what you're in the middle of. I have to drop that and go. That's just part of the job. So, you always hear that's what, kind of like what you signed up for, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, our families are real supportive. Real supportive.
Yeah, so definitely very, very supportive, very understanding. I don't think my wife will ever let me forgive the 2013 year I always think of. That's when my son was born. He was the third child. He was born in April, and we had 50 brush fires that summer. I told my wife, I'll be around to help you out. And this guy...
I'm there
So-
for moral
So,
support.
yeah, so you just never know. And then you might have 5 things to run up to the next year. Okay, so you just...
But now, you guys are special, but the normal, I wouldn't say normal, the typical firefighter, on his day off, her day off, how often do they get called back in?
It depends. It's not always for a fire. Sometimes, we're at an incident for an extended period of time, and I need to recall firefighters to cover the station for the next call because I can't make anybody available. So it's optional for them to call in and to come back, but yeah, we have really dedicated people, part of this department that that do come back, that don't just leave on, after their tour of duty and not
Cha-ching,
come back to
clock
the
out,
fire.
and I'm going
Right.
home.
We have really dedicated individuals that do a great job for this community. And that's, I'm in a different role now. I mean, yes, I started on the line and went to fires. Mike did too. For the most part now, we're more in a command role where kind of quarterbacking the fire, so to speak, right? And what do we want to do next tactically? And we work together for that. My big fear, and you shouldn't really call it a fear, but it's very concerning in making sure that everybody goes home safe at the end of the incident. I'm kind of, before I get there, they're putting themselves in harm's way, but we're making decisions after that to accomplish extinguishment, but also to keep people as safe
Yeah,
as
but it's
possible.
your decisions that could
Right.
affect
Right.
the safety of
Right.
all these people that we count on.
Right. Which is why it's serious business. It really is. And no two fires are the same. It doesn't matter. You could put an identical house and have a fire. They're gonna behave differently. It depends on the weather, depends on the contents, depends on.
Mhm.
Now, you all drive around in these big monstrous SUVs as the command centers, right?
Right.
Because question, I mean, legitimate people who don't understand have said, why are we paying for you to drive around in these enormous SUVs, until the previous chief said, come look. There's a dang command center back there for a fire.
Right. We
Yep.
have equipment, right?
Yeah. So we'll have equipment, we'll have our turnout gear and our SCBA, but then we also have the accountability board, which it kind of functions the fire, who's where, because you're always trying to track which group you're sending in, where you're sending them, how many, and who's involved there. And in other towns, mutual aid comes in, so there's a lot to keep track of. So we'll have,
We couldn't fit all of the things that we carry.
I mean, we can't give you a
into it.
Prius?
It probably wouldn't work. It probably wouldn't work. And four-wheel drive's important too,
Mhm.
for all weather situations.
Well, I would guess we'd like you to get to the incident.
Right. But I understand, gas mileage and cost. Perception's big to us. We want to do the right things, and we don't want to ask for more than
Mark,
what we
that's-
need.
To me, it's a legitimate question if it's asked for the right reason. Why do we have to spend $10 if we could spend $5? Well, if there's a reason, we spend the 10.
Right.
And when the old chief showed me the board and all this stuff, and
Yeah.
I said, okay, this won't fit in a Volkswagen Beetle. I understand. How do you become a firefighter in Milford?
Oh, in Milford, we are with the civil service system, which is operated by the state. So there's usually an exam that's offered every 2 years. A list is formed. Then we'll have openings, and we'll contact them. We'll get a list of applicants, and then we'll begin an interview process. But it's basically run through the Civil Service Commission.
Right.
So 10 people qualify under civil service. Then what? They come in for interviews with you guys? or-
Well, what happens is first we have openings right now, because due to retirements that occurred in January. So we'll be looking on the new civil service list, which is expected this weekend.
Mhm.
We'll see if it's ready. We do what's called calling for a list. So we'll get we'll requisition a list, a certification they call it. It comes in, and we'll have a list of people. It'll start with people that had family members killed in the line of duty, let's say. So they're classified as like 402 A's and B's. They'll be first. Veterans and residents. So we're a residents preference community. So we
So
are.
Milfordians get preference.
Yes, you have to be, and I won't get into the ins and outs of what happens for veterans, because we could talk for a while. It's kind of confusing, right? So there's a way for them to establish residency, right? But for an applicant, they just need to have been a resident for 12 months prior to the exam.
No, I remember when we talked about hiring physicians at the medical center. Uncle Phil, Sarah McCauley, who ran the the physicians program, said, I give preference to Milford people. Why? Because they stay. People who have families in town, people who have long ties in town, tend to stay. So that makes perfect sense to me.
Right.
You know, it's not the good old boy or good old girl network. It's fundamentally, if I've got my family here, I'm probably going to put roots down and want to stay here. So that's good to hear. What kind of qualifications do you need?
To the civil service, a high school diploma, at least is 18, 19 years?
19 years old.
19 years old.
And a driver's license, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there aren't a lot of qualifications entry level coming into the department. We will provide the training. Some come in EMT trained. They come in with college education. It depends.
Is there an advantage to that? I mean, the EMT training makes sense
Sure.
because you're hitting the ground running.
Well, it depends where they place on the list, right? So there's a matrix we need to follow,
Yeah.
right? So it depends where they fall on the list, and they'll provide a resume, and they'll be interviewed and background checks.
But you do get some say as to how will they fit, and
We have some flexibility.
that's good to hear. What are the biggest challenges you see coming up?
Well, they're constantly changing. What do I see right now?
I can help.
Yeah, help me out there.
Okay.
Because yeah,
Solar panels,
Yeah.
electric
There you go.
vehicles,
Yes.
these lithium-ion batteries that are causing fires now with their thermal runaway. That's the buzzword in our industry, right? But things are constantly changing, right? And we talk about PFAS, right? So those things, coupled on our regular, mission in trying to provide good service, that we always have to keep an eye out for, different ways to attack fires. There's things called flow path, and instead of leaving doors and windows open, closing them, and a more systematic approach or a transitional attack where we're attacking a fire from maybe a window first and then make an interior move. So there's a lot of changes, and things are constantly evolving.
Well, thank you for everything you do, and I hold steady to say I hope I never use you. But the day I need you, feels good to know you'll be there.
Thank you, Al.
yeah. Thanks, Al.
And to our 6 loyal viewers, I hope you got a little glimpse into the life of the people who run into the fires, the people who make our families a little safer. And every once in a while, just say thank you. It wouldn't hurt to wave and say thank you to our firefighters. To our 6 loyal viewers, good night, God bless, and may tomorrow be a safer night than tonight.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just